Thank you for joining us on our presentation today, sharing the results from behavior change for demand reduction campaigns in Asia, led by USAID Wildlife Asia. Next slide, please. Here at USAID, we have a learning agenda for our Combating Wildlife Trafficking program, and we really focus on three common strategic approaches, which you'll see here at the top. We have reduced consumer demand for wildlife products, also increasing community conservation, as well as building capacity for law enforcement. If you want to click one more time, Nathan. Today, we're really focusing on the demand reduction strategic approach. You want to go to one more slide? And the questions that we have for this learning agenda, I think I wanted to invite you to really think about the second and third bullet, particularly what are the appropriate metrics and methodologies for monitoring demand reduction, as well as do certain messaging strategies work better than others. I think our presenters today do an excellent job of showing us results that help answer this question. One more slide, please. And I'd like to introduce Craig Kirkpatrick, who is the project manager for USAID Wildlife Asia, to introduce today's speakers. So over to you, Craig. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Megan. So USAID Wildlife Asia is an activity out of USAID's Regional Development Mission for Asia, or RDMA. And the activity focuses on two of the strategic approaches that Megan just mentioned. The first is to reduce consumer demand, and the second is to build capacity for effective enforcement and prosecution. Now, today we'll be focusing on the reduced consumer demand through social and behavior change communication, or SBCC. And the way that we do that is through partnerships with local organizations in 3 countries. We partner with IFA in China, with Traffic in Vietnam, and here in Thailand, we partner with WildAid and also the Department of National Parks, Wildlife, and Plant Conservation. In fiscal year 2020, we were operating 9 campaigns on the 4 focal species of elephant, rhinoceros, pangolin, and tiger. But in Thailand, our focus is really on elephant and tiger, since the use of rhinoceros or pangolin is extremely rare in Thailand. So elephant and tiger are more relevant. Next slide, please. So to give you a preview of what we'll be telling you today, or the presentation today, the first is a review of SBCC processes and methods, the 5-step C module planning process, combined with a case study working us through those 5 steps from the Spiritual Beliefs campaign, which was done in Thailand about ivory and tiger parts that were used in amulets that are perceived to have a spiritual function of providing good luck or protecting from harm. There were 2 phases to this campaign. One was a good life is free of killing, and then there was a follow-on with no ivory, no tiger amulets. So first we'll give a review of the processes and methods of SBCC, and then we'll provide you with evidence of the effectiveness by comparing a 2020 post-campaign survey versus the 2018 baseline, which shows that users of these wildlife products, after the campaigns, after they'd seen the campaigns, these users, after they'd seen the campaign, had a lower belief in the spiritual benefits of ivory and tiger products, had a higher belief that ivory and tiger products were socially unacceptable, and this led to a reduction by half of individuals who were users or likely users saying that they would plan to buy. Now, any campaign is going to have difficulties when we take this grand theory of the SBCC 5-step C module and take that down into practice. And so at the very, as the last part of this presentation, our colleague from WildAid will take a look at the realities of implementation. Next slide, please. So with that introduction, what I'd like to do is now introduce the 3 presenters today. The first is Eleonora de Guzman, or Nora. She leads the demand reduction work done by USAID Wildlife Asia in Bangkok. She is representing FHI 360 in the consortium of the partners of Wildlife Asia. And she brings 30 years of experience leading million-dollar SBCC projects on family planning, maternal child health, and HIV/AIDS. She's now taking that experience and that acumen that she's developed over the past 30 years and applying it to a new area, using SBCC communication techniques to achieve conservation goals. Chinapat Chen is also part of the demand reduction team with Wildlife Asia, and he also is representing FHI 360 on the team. Chen supports the planning, implementation, and evaluation of SBCC campaigns to reduce wildlife product use, and also helps to build the capacity of local groups so that they can do SBCC campaigns of their own. Prior to joining Wildlife Asia, Chen worked with other US agencies at the mission in Bangkok, as well as with UNICEF. I'd also like to introduce Rabia Mushtaq of WildAid. She is a communication specialist for WildAid's Thailand program. She has over a decade of experience and has recent successes with campaigns such as the I Am Ivory Free campaign, the Beautiful Without Ivory campaign, and the A Good Life is Free from Killing campaign, which we will talk about today. Before WildAid, Rabia worked with WWF Thailand, as well as with PSI Thailand, which is a human rights and workers' rights organization. I would also like to mention that in 2016, Rabia was awarded the Young Communicator of the Year Award at the Asia Pacific Communication Awards platform. And I'd also like to take a moment to just mention what an important partner WildAid has been, providing over half the funding for the A Good Life is Free from Killing campaign, and even more importantly, opening their books on their influencers, which is really powerful, and allowing us to access some of the most important social media influencers for our campaigns, and that has been invaluable. And with that, I will turn it over to Nora, and she and Chen will give you the methods and then the results of this campaign.
Thank you, Craig. Good morning, everyone. It is our honor to present this first campaign in Thailand to reduce demand for ivory and tiger products that directly address spiritual beliefs. We will present how the campaign was planned using the SBCC planning process and end with key results from the rapid survey of July 2020. The planning process is described in USAID Wildlife Asia's SBCC Demand Reduction Guidebook, which we will launch on December 15 through a webinar by the Community of Practice. Next slide, please. Step 1 of the planning process is understand the situation and target audience. Next slide, please. Based on the consumer survey that Wildlife Asia conducted in Thailand in 2018, we obtained data on the proportion of the general population that own or would like to own ivory and tiger products. You see that the proportion is small, but still composed of a large number if you count 70 million total Thailand population and get 3% of that. This consumer segment is strong because the members are affluent, so they have disposable incomes. Next slide, please. Wildlife Asia's 2018 research also showed that spiritual beliefs in the power of ivory and tiger to bring good luck and prevent harm constitute the main motivating factors or drivers to the desire for ivory and tiger products in Thailand. Next slide, please. The qualitative component of our 2018 research gave us insights on these spiritual beliefs. They are strongly held and are handed down from elders, family, and religious leaders. They should not be referred to as superstitious. As a Thai saying goes, you may not believe, but do not disrespect. Next slide, please. So based on the research data, we established the target audience profile of those consumers of ivory and tiger products driven by spiritual beliefs. As you can read from the slide, they are mainly male, affluent, well-educated, small and medium business owners, and they get information on ivory or tiger from the internet or trusted persons. Next slide, please. Step 2 is focus and design the SBCC strategy and interventions. Next slide, please. Our campaign adopted 2 SBCC strategies: behavior change communication to directly address and engage our target audience through channels they regularly access, supported by social mobilization to engage those who influence the target audience's spiritual beliefs, like Buddhist leaders. Next slide, please. So I will turn it over now to Chin.
Thank you, Nara. Step 3, creating message and materials. Next slide, please. With our creative agency, we developed two message creative concepts and tested them via 2 FGD composed of actual users of ivory and tiger amulets. The first message concept was hard-hitting, bold, dark, linked to killing, saying do not take another life for our life. Next slide, please. The second message concept was more positive, affirming, encouraging, saying good luck and success comes from one's own capability. Next slide. Results from the concept testing showed that the darker, hard-hitting messaging was more appealing and believable to respondents, who also said that it would be good to show stronger images, actual products, and keywords like protection. They added that the messages should not say that their beliefs are wrong, but instead raise questions to cast doubt on these beliefs. Next slide, please. Based on these concept test results, we selected the messaging that would question and raise doubt about these beliefs. Phase 1 was implemented by Wildlife Asia with WildAid, which also provided more than 50% cost share to Phase 1. Phase 1 would question the power of ivory and tiger to bring good luck. Phase 2 will question the power of ivory and tiger to protect from harm. Both phases will use the same call to action. We will show strong image and credible messengers, particularly Buddhist monks. Next slide, please. Phase 1, called A Good Life is Free of Killing, asked the question, products that come from killing, are you sure they are auspicious? The message was delivered by a very popular and respected Buddhist monk and 2 prominent celebrities known for their charity work. The call to action was, stop buying, stop using products from ivory and tiger. Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Wildlife Asia and WildAid developed, pre-tested among ivory and tiger product users and produced short videos for social media, key visuals, and ads for out-of-home media. This campaign was fully supported by our government counterpart, Thailand's Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, or the DNP. The CITES director opened phase 1 of the campaign launch held in October 2019. We will now show, this is the 60-second video of phase 1.
คุณเคยถามตัวเองไหมว่าการอยากมีชีวิตที่ดีแต่ทำไมต้องพรากชีวิตอื่น ช้างและเสือในป่ากำลังโดนฆ่าเพียงเพื่อมาเป็นสิ่งที่คนเราอยากสวมใส่
ของจากความตายนั้นมีคุณค่าหรือคุณค่าคุณแน่ใจแล้วเหรอว่าคุณสวมใส่อย่างเดียวไม่ได้มีส่วนค่า
สิ่งที่เกิดจากการเข็นฆ่ามั่นใจหรือว่าจะเป็นมงคล
หยุดซื้อหยุดใช้ผลิตภัณฑ์จากเสือโคร่งและงาช้าง
เพราะหยุดซื้อคือหยุดฆ่า
Phase 2, implemented by Wildlife Asia, called No Ivory, No Tiger Amulets, asked the question, do you think ivory and tiger fangs can really protect you? They cannot even protect themselves. This question was actually suggested by one respondent during our FGDs. The same call to action as in Phase 1, stop buying, stop using products from ivory and tiger, is communicated. Next slide, please. For Phase 2, Wildlife Asia developed, pre-tested among ivory and tiger product users and produced one 60-second video, one key visual, and short video versions for placement in social media and tuk-tuks. Our government counterpart, the DNP, fully supported this campaign and requested for videos with Lao and Myanmar subtitles to show in border areas. DNP also hosted Phase 2 campaign launch during World Wildlife Day in March 2020. Next slide, please, for the video.
เขี้ยวเสือและงาช้างปกป้องคุณได้จริงหรือโยมตื่นมาในวันที่ดีๆกิจการราบรื่นไม่มีอะไรทำร้ายโยมได้โยมสามารถทำสิ่งที่ดีที่สุดเพื่อคนรอบข้างโยมแคล้วคลาดจากพยันตรายโยมได้รับการคุ้มครองโยมไม่ต้องคิดถึงเรื่องที่ยังมาไม่ถึงอยู่กับปัจจุบันกับสิ่งที่สำคัญที่สุดนั่นก็คือการใช้ชีวิตจะมั่นใจได้อย่างไรว่าวัตถุมงคลจากช้างจากเสือจะปกป้องโยมได้ขณะชีวิตของเขาเองยังไม่รอดเลยโยมเชื่อได้แต่ความเชื่อของโยมต้องไม่เบียดเบียนชีวิตผู้อื่นหยุดซื้อหยุดใช้ผลิตภัณฑ์จากเสือโคร่งและงาช้าง
Now step 4, implement and monitor. Next slide, please. Our overall media strategy for Phase 1 to 2 was to place our messages in channels that our target audience, current and potential consumers regularly access. We did not target the general population, but address current and potential ivory and tiger users driven by spiritual beliefs. The Phase 1 media plan implemented by WildAid used Facebook, Instagram, amulet magazines, and websites, and print ads on bus shelters, sidewalks, in locations frequented by our target audience. Next slide, please. Media monitoring results from Phase 1 showed a very large reach from paid media, as well as considerable earned media leverage by WildAid, as you will see from this slide. Next slide, please. For Phase 2, Wildlife Asia placed ads on Facebook, Instagram, an online forum, and in 20 tuk-tuks flying routes between Thap Prajan, a popular area for the amulet trade in Bangkok in June 2020. Facebook and Instagram videos were shown to those fitting our target audience profile. Next slide, please. Phase 2 results showed a very large reach, considering that placements were for an average of 1 month, as you will see from this slide. Next slide, please. For social mobilization, Wildlife Asia is engaging a large established network of Buddhist spiritual leaders, the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, or INEP, to amplify our messages and hold conversations with their followers through dharmas, their members' social media accounts, and personal interactions. With INEP, we held the first workshop with 20 Buddhist monks and 10 nuns from temples all over Thailand in October 2020, and 2 more activities will be held in 2021. Next slide, please.
Yeah, now we go to evaluate and replan, which is step 5. Next slide, please. Wildlife Asia conducted a rapid survey in July 2020 to determine, 1, the recall of our 4 Thailand demand reduction campaigns, 2 of which are the phases 1 and 2 of this spiritual beliefs campaign, and 2, to determine changes in desired attitudes, perceptions of social acceptability, and intention to use among those exposed to the campaigns compared with data from the consumer sample of the 2018 consumer research. Next slide, please. We used a questionnaire with the same questions as the 2018 consumer survey for attitude, social acceptability, and intention to use, and added questions on message recall. Respondents for this rapid survey were randomly selected based on the demographics of consumers of ivory and tiger products revealed by our 2018 research. Data were collected in July 2020 via SurveyMonkey and overseen by our research agency. The survey was granted IRB, or ethical approvals, by FHI 360 and Chulalongkorn University here in Thailand. Next slide, please. This slide compares the consumption characteristics of the 2018 baseline survey and the 2020 survey samples. The 2018 survey respondents comprised 45% ivory or tiger product owners, while this 2020 survey had 70% ivory or tiger product owners. Next slide, please. For our analysis, we used a simplified model from our theory of change. The model shows the interplay of attitudes composed of perceived benefits and perceived concerns about ivory and tiger, and social norms or perceptions of social acceptability of using ivory and tiger that work together to influence intention to buy or use. In this case, since we are reducing and not creating demand, the desired intention is not to buy or not to use. Using this model, we selected our survey indicators or metrics to measure behavior change. Next slide, please. We measured attitudes. As I said, benefits and concerns. Next slide, please. When we are creating demand for a product, we generally aim to increase perceived benefit and reduce perceived concern about the product. But since this campaign is to reduce demand, and based on our messaging, our objective is to reduce perceived benefit and increase perceived concern about ivory and tiger products. For this campaign, we want fewer respondents to agree to the benefit and more respondents to agree to the concern. The metrics for benefits are beliefs in ivory and tiger to bring good luck and to protect from harm. The metrics for concern are beliefs that ivory and tiger's spiritual power is unfounded and that ivory and tiger products are associated with killing or cruelty. And these are the same questions as in the 2018 baseline research. Next slide, please. We measured social norms, in this case, social unacceptability. Next slide, please. For social norms, our objective is to increase those who agree that buying or owning ivory and tiger is not socially acceptable. Again, this is the same question as in the 2018 survey. Next slide, please. We measured intention to not buy or not use ivory or tiger in the future. As I said, the result of the interplay of attitudes and social norms. Next slide, please. For intention to purchase in the future, our objective is to decrease intention to buy. Again, this is the same question asked in the 2018 survey. The next set of slides will focus on the actual 2020 survey results. First, we will present some findings on recall of the spiritual beliefs campaign messages, and then we will present correlations between those who recall or are exposed to the spiritual beliefs campaign messages and the 2018 baseline survey sample of ivory and tiger consumers and intenders. Next slide, please. First, message recall findings. Nearly 76% recalled at least one message from the spiritual beliefs campaign. And this is quite a good recall for a less than 1 year project. Next slide, please. These are the specific messages recalled, and these are multiple responses. The call to action message, highlighted red, for phases 1 and 2 is recalled the most. More respondents recall messages from phase 1, highlighted yellow, probably because phase 1 also ran for a longer period than phase 2, messages highlighted green. Next slide, please. These are again multiple responses. Main channels recalled were Facebook and Instagram. This slide shows that our dissemination plan actually reached our target audience. You saw earlier that we had a very large reach. Those are like estimated reach, but the actual reach is 76% at least of the respondents. So we say we were able to reach 76% of them. Note that out-of-home channels were recalled by a significant proportion, showing that these channels were also effective. Next slide, please. These are again multiple responses. Regarding celebrities, the highest recalled was Bin Banlarit, who is very famous in Thailand. And there was significant recall of the 2 monks featured in phase 1 and phase 2. Next slide, please. Here we see that majority of respondents recall seeing or hearing the messages or celebrities more than once, which is what we are aiming for. We would like the message to reach the target audience not once, but more than once. The more times the ads are seen or heard by the same individuals, and we refer to this as frequency of recall or exposure, the more effective is message retention and engagement by the target audience. Next slide, please. Now, this slide has a lot of information. We will dissect it slowly. Now, this slide shows changes in desired attitudes between the 2018 baseline and the 2020 survey among those exposed to the spiritual beliefs campaign messages. Remember, agreement to the perceived benefits should decrease and agreement to the perceived concerns should increase. The red lines represent results from the 2018 survey. The dark blue lines represent results from the 2020 survey. For benefits, please look at the items inside the blue box at the top of the slide. Here, we see a large decrease among those who agree with the perceived benefits that ivory and tiger bring good luck and that ivory and tiger protect from harm. For concerns, please look at the top 2 items inside the green box. Here, we see a large increase among those who agree with the concern that ivory and tiger's spiritual powers are unfounded. T-tests to check significance of differences based on the mean showed that the figures in 2018 and 2020 are significantly different at 0.05 confidence level. Now, these findings on decreased agreement to benefits and increased agreement to concerns show that the campaign messages that directly counter spiritual beliefs are resonating with current and potential consumers and changing their attitudes. Note that these are very new messages, and there were no campaigns directly countering spiritual beliefs prior to the Wildlife Asia campaign in Thailand. Now, let's look at the last two items inside the green box on this slide. We see that the proportion of those who agree that tiger and ivory products are associated with killing elephants and tigers did not increase, the last two items below, and even slightly decreased, did not increase and even slightly decreased, sorry. Note that in 2018, this proportion was already high, 79% for ivory and 86% for tiger. We calculated for significance of differences between the 2018 and 2020 results for these two items, and we found that they are not significantly different, meaning that these percentages in 2018 and in 2020 are statistically the same. This finding implies that conservation type messaging that merely links ivory and tiger products with animal killing or cruelty or extinction of the species, for example, may no longer be resonating since current and potential consumers already have high awareness of and agreement to these messages. Okay, next slide, please. This slide shows results for social acceptability. We see that the perception that buying ivory and tiger products is not acceptable among family and friends greatly increased, actually more than doubled, from 2018 to 2020. Although, as we say, the proportions are still below 50%, not yet the majority. Note that perception of social unacceptability for ivory at 39% is still lower than for tiger at 50%. Figures for 2018 and 2020 are significantly different at 0.05 confidence level. Next slide, please. This and the following slide show intention to buy. Those who say that they will not buy ivory products in the future, the green box, greatly increased from 9% on the left, as you can see, in 2018 to nearly 40% in 2020. Differences between 2018 and 2020 figures are significantly different at 0.05 confidence level. Note that there is also a reduction in intention to buy ivory by more than half, red box, from 79% to 35%. However, there is an increase in the proportion of what we call undecideds, the gray box, who say that they may or may not buy ivory, from 12% in 2018 to 25% in 2020. Next slide, please. For tiger products, those who say they will not buy greatly increased from 5% in 2018 to 49% in 2020, green box. There is also a reduction in intention to buy by more than half. As I said, look at the red box, from 75% to 29%. These percentages are significantly different at 0.05 confidence level. The proportion of undecideds, however, for tiger who say they may or may not buy remain the same, more or less. This is the gray box. Next slide, please. So what are our conclusions and recommendations? First, our messaging, casting doubt on spiritual beliefs, seems to be working. We have large improvements in desired attitudes. We still need to further decrease agreement to benefits to a smaller minority and increase agreement to concerns to a majority. Conclusion 2, messaging that links ivory and tiger products with animal killing or cruelty, again, appeal to conservation, animal preservation, may have reached saturation. There was no significant change in 2020, since agreement was already high in 2018 at 80%. Conservation messaging per se may no longer be resonating. We need to go deeper in our messaging. If we need to promote conservation, we have to link killing of animals with the target audience's own interests and beliefs, like highlighting the Buddhist teaching that having a good life means preserving other forms of life. Next slide, please. Another conclusion is that the use of monks and credible celebrities is effective. We need to continue featuring monks and credible messengers and expand engagement of monks and nuns and spiritual leaders for social mobilization efforts. The next conclusion is on perception of social unacceptability. We know that this greatly increased. It is now 39% for ivory and 50% for tiger. However, we need to further increase these figures, especially for ivory, to a majority by sustaining the campaign, both media and social mobilization, and strengthening further also social mobilization activities with influencer groups, especially those who are close to the consumers, people like me. The last conclusion, intention to not buy greatly increased, now 40% for ivory and 49% for tiger. We do need to further increase this, especially for ivory, to a majority by sustaining the campaign to increase frequency of exposure to and engagement with our messages. We also need to focus on that significant proportion of undecideds, especially those who say that they may or may not buy ivory in the future. Finally, in reducing consumption of illegal wildlife products, there is no one magic bullet. We have to counter the personal drivers for consumption, change a number of attitudes and beliefs, and also change social norms to reduce intention to consume and have an effect on actual demand. Thank you. Now I hand it over to Rabia.
Thank you, Nora. Hello, I'm Rabia from WildAid, and in the next few slides, I'll be sharing some thoughts from implementation side on the campaign, Good Life is Free of Killing campaign, which was a joint campaign between USAID Wildlife Asia and WildAid. Next, please. So the campaign had over 73 media mentions, engaged over 2 million people, was viewed by over 1.2. And at the end, as Nora just presented, all 3 of the influencers were among top 4 most recalled. And similarly, 4 out of 5 messages was most recalled. But of course, there were challenges and lessons learned along the way, and that's what I'll be going over. Next, please. So challenges. Our first challenge was the timeline. A lot of the times we would plan to go as per a timeline, but when working with high-profile influencers, we had to rely on their timeline and work back from the dates proposed, especially when it's a pro bono partnership. Certain times it would mean, rushing through internal process to get the job done. Also, if a topic or occasion relevant to our campaign is trending in the society, we may need to adjust our campaign timeline to launch around the same time for a larger impact, like hitting the iron when it's hot. We also had to deal with a lot of rejection when it came to securing media placements. You know, the challenge of reaching the 1% or to 3% of the population who use these products meant that our media placement would need to have a component which is very targeted, but mixed with the mass media strategy. What we experienced was that a lot of the target media, like amulet websites and amulet magazines, like this one, I don't know if you can see. Here's our ad on a magazine that agreed to placement, while a lot of others, like these magazines, declined to place our ads on their platform because they felt that our message was too targeted and would make their readers or viewers feel uncomfortable and not return to their platform again. So we revised our strategy to extend placements in other willing media outlets or in other outlets that we think would be more effective. Next slide, please. As Nora mentioned, selection of campaign influencers was done by testing it with the audience during the pre-test. And the 3 influencers shortlist happened to support the same political party, which was, pure coincidence. However, there were few sentiments post-campaign launch saying that the campaign is targeting only people who support one political party and others might feel excluded. I think what we would do is in future make sure that we would have influencers who are diverse, not only in their background, gender, but also political interests. With this campaign, we had also planned to deliver location-based SMS in areas where ivory and tiger amulets were sold. However, the SMS service provider declined to distribute our message as our budget was not sufficient to reach our target audience, and also the message was too sensitive and targeted towards the group. What they suggested is that something like this would work better with an awareness-raising campaign where the message is more general. And the last challenge we faced was engaging social media influencers. We had reached out to several social media influencers to place our campaign videos, but were turned down as they prefer to share news that is current, related to ongoing discussion in the society, or linked with a launch date. Also, this time we had asked them to share a video where in the past when we worked with social media influencers, we would often ask them to co-create content with them. So I think for future campaigns, we would work in room for co-creation and add that into our timeline. Next slide, please. So now let's have a look on the brighter side, what worked for the campaign and why some of the messages and influencers performed really well. I think what we can say is pre-test really works. It doesn't have to be a focus group with 20 to 30 people, but even with a group of 5 to 10 people can help point you in the right direction. We tested influencers, storyboard, key visuals, and that helped ensure the likability and shareability of the campaign message to a certain extent. Strong message and visuals also really work to help question long-held beliefs in Thailand. It's something we've always seen looking at the trend in Thai media. And the responses we got from the pre-test and sentiments of the public online, we can confirm that it really works well, but given that it's paired with a message that appeals to audiences, motivations, and beliefs. Next, please. Facebook advertising also works, and I think the budget that we spend on it is worth it. We can choose to reach the audience group, select people who match certain interests, and deliver our ads to them for the duration that we want. And we can also see real-time, reactions and discussions that can help us, shape the campaign along the way or tweak any messages that we need to. And regarding the influencers for this campaign, I think they played a huge role. At the time of the campaign launch, that is around October 2019 until July 2020, like the whole campaign duration, Bin Banlalit, good public image and mass following played a huge role in the likability, shareability, and credibility of our campaign content. Venerable War, the monk, and Top Darni Nut, the celebrity, were also effective in engaging those who had already followed them. And I say at the time of the campaign because, recent political situation in Thailand is quite sensitive, and some of the sentiments made by the influencers were also very sensitive. So I would think about using them, if we had to use them today. I think we need to think a bit more on this. But regardless, apart from this, what made our content more relevant to our audience and resonate with them was the similarity in beliefs and demographics between the influencers and the target audience. And lastly, what we found was helpful is to have more than one influencer for the campaign. It allowed us to target different audiences and also gave us more options for media placement. To wrap up, I would say the results that Nora and Chin presented show that despite some of the challenges we faced along the way, this campaign really worked and helped make a dent in changing consumer behavior and perception towards ivory and tiger products in Thailand. And that's something that gives us hope to continue working on this issue and to continue working on demand reduction. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nora, Chin, and Rabia, for such an excellent presentation. I really appreciate hearing about, as Jan Verdefe from World Wildlife Fund noted, what didn't work as well as what has worked for you. I'm sure people in our audience have a ton of questions, so please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. I would like to point out that Nora, if you could make some comments and please chime in, Rabia and Chin, regarding kind of scale and impact and cost effectiveness. Could you go over a little bit kind of what the expenses were for the campaign and how that relates to the target audience?
Yes. Hello again, this is Nora. For the phase 1 campaign, our direct costs were more or less at $150,000. This was at staggered periods between December 2019 to June 2020. And it was a very focused campaign targeting really the users and intenders of ivory and tiger amulets and spiritual products. For the phase 2, the direct costs were around $110,000 to $120,000. This includes production, development, and media placements. So I think to go to scale would maybe entail the same amount if you want to really go to other cities, because this is mainly focused in Bangkok. Using social media is actually very cost efficient because you spend a very small amount to reach a large number of the target audience. I think, for example, for our phase 2 campaign, it was just a few cents per person reached or per unit reached. So I think compared to other campaigns, it's really cost effective in terms of what you can do with what you have and the results that you will attain.
Mm-hmm. We had one question in the chat box regarding work with shopkeepers. I thought, Rabia, maybe you could go into some more detail about the challenges that you experienced with that.
Sure. I think working with shopkeepers in Thailand, it's difficult because there's still a legal trade for ivory in Thailand, ivory that comes from captive elephants. So in that case, I think it's always going to be something that's very challenging. As long as they're still allowed to trade in ivory, it would be hard to get them on board with us. But what we've seen is that with stricter laws and the Ivory Act being introduced, there were a lot of decline in the ivory traders as well. This was back in, I think, 2016, 2017 with WWF work. I think there was a reduction in the number of ivory traders after the Ivory Act was introduced in Thailand. At least on the shopkeeper side, I think what would be most efficient is law enforcement.
Great. There's a question in the chat box, Nora, that I think is a really great one regarding kind of the dark, hard-hitting messages and kind of versus the more positive ones, which is what we kind of think about being more empowering and leading to behavior change. Can you talk a little bit about that and the adaptations that you made, particularly from your pre-testing?
Yes, as we have presented, we actually tested 2 concepts. One is the more affirmative, positive one, saying that you can have a good life and a good future by your own capacity, your own capability, versus this darker messaging, which says that, you know, do not use ivory because it destroys our life or does not protect you. And based on the responses from our respondents in the 2 FGDs that we conducted, and these are FGDs among respondents who are actual owners of ivory and tiger products. They said that, you know, this positive messaging does not appeal to them. It will not resonate. I think it's also because these are very, very entrenched beliefs. So you'd need to sort of jolt them. And I think it is because it's a demand reduction, and we as of now are not really presenting any alternative products. Because, for example, I know that, for example, for the anti-smoking campaign, and I remember reading this about the anti-smoking campaign in Florida. This is, again, demand reduction.
Mm-hmm.
And they found, based on the study, that the hard-hitting messages work the most in the terms of the ads. So I think it really depends on the messaging, and it really depends on the target audience.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on whether you are creating demand or reducing demand. Because, for example, there's another type of communication called, as you know, risk communication,
mm-hmm.
which a lot of even WHO is using now for COVID, for example. And they are showing the consequences of COVID, or the consequences of something, of a current behavior,
mm-hmm.
to the people who are actually performing that undesired behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I think, an either or. It really
mm-hmm.
depends on the situation, the target audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like how you mentioned risk there, because I do think there was a lot of risk in this campaign when you're really, you're really going after some entrenched spiritual beliefs. It's certainly something to keep in mind. Related to that, there's a question about the cause, or the potential, for response bias when you're dealing with social desirability and normative beliefs. Can you talk a little bit about how you controlled for that bias?
Actually, the second one was totally, how do you call it? Anonymous, in the sense, because this was online. We did not take any personal identifiable information as per our ethical approval process. And then we actually sent, the SurveyMonkey sent 800 questions to the eligible participants, meaning eligibility, has these demographic characteristics, and actually own ivory or tiger, or desired at some time to own ivory and tiger. And I think actually this 2020, we have more honest respondents compared to the 2018, because the 2018 survey, this was the booster sample, was done on a face-to-face basis. So I think we tried to control for anonymity, and we had the feeling that the respondents for 2020 were more honest in their answers. So that's why these online surveys are also quite good, because it controls for response bias, meaning they feel anonymous. No personal identifiable information at all was asked.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how you selected your influencers and your celebrities, and kind of which ones do you think were more effective, and also what role do you think that partnering with DNP, the Department of National Parks and Wildlife in Thailand, did they play?
Maybe Rabia can answer that?
Sure. So I think while selecting the influencers for the Good Life is Free of Killing campaign, what we looked at is kind of just, looking through Facebook, looking at people who wear ivory products, who wear tiger products, who, post online about it. And what we found, something common is that a lot of them followed Bin Bandile. So that was one person, and he has a mass following. He works as a rescue volunteer, is really credible. And we see that a lot of people that follow him are likely to use these products. That was one of our selection criteria, basically based on judgment, and we kind of shortlisted him. And then we wanted, we were looking to have someone from the spiritual background. Initially, we had tried to get, those, I don't know what's the right word for it, Nora. Is it the voodoo masters, like those who perform, like, different kind of spells and magic on this ivory products, or shamans? Yeah, shamans. That's the right word. We wanted to reach out to them, but we found it would be very sensitive because they are the ones who are promoting these products, and it's unlikely that they would join in our campaign. And then the most respected monk at that time who had a mass following was Venerable Paul, and that's how we shortlisted him. Mm-hmm. And we also look at someone who is a woman, and Chobdar and Inuit came into that category because her age group was similar to those who use ivory products. She stars in Thai TV dramas, it's well recognized. Mm-hmm. And one of the comments that, after the campaign someone posted on her profile is that, the campaign message is really effective. If I really want to give up my ivory looking at the video. So that was something positive that came out of it. I think that's an example. And on DNP side, I think it's really definitely added some weight to the campaign to have like government endorsement, because it makes the campaign much more official and easier for us to also get the campaign placed in different media outlets, because it's backed by the government organization. And it also helps, support the government as well, because they're also working on this, but sometimes they don't have that capacity to produce such material.
Yeah. May I add to what Rabia said? Remember, Rabia, we spent like a lot of, like 2 or 3 meetings just brainstorming on the influencers that we will approach.
Yes. Yes.
So
we had like lists of so many people that we had like cut down.
Great. I want to squeeze in one really quick 30-second answer. If you could let us know, Nora, if you might be doing any focus groups. We had a question about, do you have any plans to reach out to people who didn't see the campaign, or to see what people think about those who might not have changed their attitudes or behavior?
Actually, we had planned to do that, but we may not be, as you know, the project is ending, and we can still do, we had planned to have focus group discussions, but what happened was we had great difficulties in getting people to come to the FGDs. So it was really very difficult. So our research consultant said, Nora, I think we cannot proceed any longer. We had one FGD. We're actually analyzing the results. And we were planning to have 6 actually. Those who adopted, those who did not, and who did not see. But it's very difficult to get people to come to the FGDs. Even to get the FGDs for the concept testing was very difficult for us. I don't know, there's a lot of hesitancy, especially if you're talking about actual owners or intenders.
Well, thank you all, Nora, Chin, Rabia, for such an excellent and stimulating conversation, and for sharing the results of your work with us. We do have a poll question. We'd love to hear from our audience about how you think this webinar will help you, of how you might apply this to your work. So if you could take this one question poll, we would really appreciate it. So, and then please join me in a round of virtual applause, maybe through the chat box, just thanking our speakers for such a wonderful presentation. In the coming week, I will circulate this recording along with a new handbook on how to do this kind of social and behavior change campaign on your own. We're launching that next week in another Community of Practice webinar, and really look forward to sharing that and these results. So thank you again to all of our presenters.
Thank you.
Have a great day.